When I was in the first grade, I fell in love with a girl named and I remember I ran up to her in the sandbox and I said, I love you. And she said, you're the color of poop. I grew up in a small town called Davis in Northern California, and I was one of the few brown kids at my school. An aerial shot of our playground was just like a sea of white and just a few specks of brown here and there. Kind of like a modern-day hip-hop concert. And I just wanted to fit in, you know? And in the third grade, I remember Miss Anderson had this assignment where she asked us to write down what we want to be when we grow up. And some kids were like, I want to be an astronaut. I want to be an NBA player. And I wrote, I want to be white. And Miss Anderson was like, what do you mean? And I was like, I want this part of my skin to be all of my skin. And that's really what I wanted. I just wanted to fit in with everyone else. Now, my dad had immigrated from a small town in India called Aligarh in the early 80s, and he immigrated to Davis. And he was the only son in his entire family that made it to the States. And I was his only son. And that meant that we had very strict rules in our house. He was going to forsake our fun in order to secure our American dream. I mean, even the simplest tasks were such a headache with my dad. I couldn't even go to like a matinee movie on a Saturday. It was just like, Dad, can I go to Lethal Weapon 4? Hasan, tum pagal ho? Hum Aligarh se naye Lethal Weapon 4 ke liye? Hasan, are you crazy? We didn't come from Aligarh for Lethal Weapon 4. And that was like my life. And by the time my senior year had rolled around, I had been cut from the basketball team for a third year in a row. I had just gotten off Vacutane, so my skin and face were peeling, and I had yet to go to a football game or school dance. So I was just killing it, you know, just like really murdering the Davis High social scene. But there was one bright spot, and her name was Bethany Reed. And her family had just moved from Ohio, and she had curly red hair, and she was just like really pretty, and she smelled like Big Red Cinnamon Gun even after PE. I don't know how she did it, but she just like was amazing. And we had AP Calc together, and she didn't know about the Davis High social hierarchy, so she thought my jokes were funny, and she thought I was smart, and she really liked my AOL Instant Message game. Like, whatever I lacked in real life game, my digital game was tight. Like, if you guys had added me on AM back then, ladies, it would have been game over. And we hit it off. We would just like, we had AP Calc together every day, and I remember she would invite me over to her house for study group. And I remember going to her house for the first time, and her family, they were very well off. They had just moved from Ohio, and her father was this well-to-do cardiologist. And they had this beautiful white picket fence, and this really nice Ford Expedition, and this dog. They looked like they were out of a J. Crew catalog, you know? And I remember sitting there, and we were doing homework, and then we had dinner, and her dad was like, would you like some more mashed potatoes? Plop. And I was like, wow, white people, tight. And she was like, hey, when can I come over to your house? And I was like, yeah, I don't know. I kind of had this cardinal rule. I didn't invite school friends over to my house. That's the last thing you want to do. Invite high school friends over to your house, open yourself up to public ridicule. What language are your parents speaking? What are they saying right now? What's that smell? Nah, I'm not going to do that. But Bethany was cool. Like, I felt like she got it. So, on a whim, I just invited her over to my place to study. And I remember running home. I ran through the door, and I was like, look, Mom, Dad, school friend is coming over. Everyone be normal. And my dad's like, we're normal. He puts a samosa in his mouth. I'm like, Jesus. Like, oh, man. I remember she came over, and we're on my dining room table doing integrals, right? And you can hear the hiss of pakoras frying in the kitchen, and my parents are arguing in Hindi, and Kabhi Khushi Kabhi Gum is playing on ZTV. And I was like, oh, man. And I'm looking up at Bethany, and I was just like, oh, please don't say anything. Please don't say anything. Please don't say anything. And she just looks up from her calc book and is like, man, that seems nice. And I was like, I love you. Can I marry you? You're my white princess. Can we do this? I didn't say that last part, but in my mind, I was like, oh, she accepts me, you know? And she kept coming over, and we kept doing integrals on the dining room table. And I remember one night, I was walking her back to her car, and we walked to the end of the driveway, and just right before she hops into her car, she leans over and just kisses me. Bam, right there on the lips. No tongue, but fireworks went off in my head. It was the whole nine, son. It was bananas. And that was it. She just got back in the car, and she drove off. She didn't ask me for anything else. She knew the rules, you know? She didn't ask, can we be boyfriend, girlfriend? Can we hold hands? She knew my dad's rules. No fun, no friends, especially no girlfriends. And that was awesome. Now, my AP Calc class was a tight-knit group of overachievers. And our AP Calc teacher, Mr. had a mission. He wanted us to have amazing lives outside of our calc textbooks. So I remember one day during spring quarter, he stands up in front of the class and he's like, all right, you guys are killing it academically. You're going to go to the nation's best universities, but I want you guys to have lives, which is why I am making prom mandatory. And one of the kids in the back of the class was like, do we get extra credit, Mr. And he's like, no, you get life credit. You're going to prom. And I'm sitting there in the back of the class and I'm like, yeah, right, Mr. Are you serious? Have you seen this group? You think the Jehovah's Witness girl is going to go to prom? Her parents aren't going to let her go to prom. We had a Korean exchange student. You got to speak English to go, hey, will you go to prom with me? That's not happening. They used to sell cup of noodles at my high school, right? And there was this kid in my class named Milan. People would eat their cup of noodles, then leave their broth on the lunch tables, and Milan would go up to the lunch tables and drink people's lukewarm broth. And I was like, there's no way broth breath is getting a date to prom. But Mr. was focused. So he pulls down a whiteboard, and all our names are on a bracket leading up to the big dance. It was like March Madness for nerds. And he's like, everyone is going to prom. And as the weeks went on, everyone got a date to prom. And then 3 days before prom, Mr. pulled down the bracket in front of the entire class, and the last two names on the board were Hasan Minhaj and Bethany Reed. And the whole class erupted. They were like, ooh! Ow! Yeah! And I just looked down at my textbook and I was like, there is no way Dad is going to let me go to prom. And Bethany was cool. She didn't say anything. She let the bell ring. And then I was walking to my locker, and Bethany chased me down to my locker and just stopped me, and she said, hey, look, I don't want to embarrass you in front of the class, but you've been my best friend ever since my family's moved here from Ohio. So I was just wondering, would you go to prom with me? And I said, yes. Yes, I will go to prom with you, my white princess. I didn't say the last part, but I said yes, you know? Now I had to ask Dad. Now I'm a good kid. I love my parents. And I had seen a lot of sitcoms growing up. I watched TGIF. I figured, all right, I'm going to go home. We're going to have a Danny Tanner moment. I'm going to pour my heart out. He's going to give me a hug, cue emotional music, roll credits. I'm going to prom. So I was like, Dad, can I go to prom? And he was like, Hasan, main tumhara moor tod dunga, which means, Hasan, I will break your face. Duly noted, Father. All right, okay. So I went with option B, and I call up Beth, and I was like, look, Beth, here's the deal. I'm going to have to sneak out of the house, all right? We're going to take your dad's car, we're going to go to prom, and hopefully you drop me off early. I'm going to sneak back into the house, and if my dad catches me and kills me, well, YOLO, you know what I mean? You live once. What an amazing way to go out, right? And she's like, deal, let's do this. Night of prom rolls around, and I put on my JCPenney suit, and I climb out my window, and I have my trusty Huffy on the side of the house, and I hop on my Huffy, and I'm biking over to her house down Montgomery Avenue, and I'm balancing the corsage, and I'm making sure I'm biking extra wide with my knees out. That way my slacks don't get caught up in my bike chains. And the sun is setting, and it's this beautiful Davis evening, you know? And I get to her house, and I hop off my bike, and I'm walking up her driveway, And I get to her door, and I'm like, wow, I'm doing it. I'm going to prom with Bethany Reed. This is the American dream. And I ring the doorbell, and her mom opens the door. And then I look over Mrs. Reed's shoulder, because she has this look of concern on her face. And I glance over, and I see putting a corsage on Bethany's wrist. The captain of the water polo team. And I look back at Bethany's mom, and she's like, oh my God, honey, I'm so sorry. Did Bethany not tell you? You see, we have a lot of family back in Ohio, and we're going to be taking a lot of pictures tonight. And they're going to see them, and we don't know if it'd be a good fit for us. Do you need a ride home? Mr. Reed can give you a ride home. And I said, no, I'm okay. I have my bike. And I biked home, and I snuck back into my room, and I just played Mario Kart for the rest of the night. And that's the best I've ever been dressed playing Mario Kart. I remember the next day at school before first period, Bethany found me at my locker. She was like, hey, look, in Mr. class, everyone's going to ask what happened. Please don't say anything. My parents are good people, and just people here at school wouldn't understand. Please don't say anything. I just stayed quiet. 7th period rolled around, and Mr. got up in front of the class, and he said, so, lovebirds, what's the deal? What happened? And I remember looking up from my calc textbook, and Bethany was looking down at hers. I said, yeah, you know, I decided not to go. I wasn't really feeling it, you know? And everybody in the class turned and looked at me and was like, you jerk. You stood up the new girl. Pfft, what a d***. And that was it. We never spoke to each other again. A few years later, my dad suffered a quintuple bypass. He suffered a really bad heart attack, and my sister called me and told me he was in the hospital. So I drove up from LA to visit him, and that was the most vulnerable he had been, physically and emotionally. And I remember sitting there next to him in his hospital bed, and I decided to share this prom story with him. And I remember at the end of the story, he was like, Hasan, I'm mad at you. And I was like, why? Because I lied? Because I snuck out of the house and I didn't tell you guys? And he said, no. It's because you didn't forgive Bethany. You see, when I first immigrated to America from Aligarh, I was scared. I was scared of everything America represented. I was scared that, you know, you'd get into a gang or you'd start doing drugs. So I tried to protect you from everything bad that could happen to you. And Bethany's parents, they were scared of us. They were scared of some sort of thing that they had seen on TV. So they were protecting her from us. And you were scared of us, and she was scared of them, and everybody was scared of everybody. But Hasan, himmat honi chahiye bhai. और सच बातें के लिए हिम्मत होनी चाहिए और डरना मत और तुम्हारा हिम्मत डरने से ज्यादा होनी चाहिए. Hasan, you gotta be brave, man. And your courage to do what's right has to be greater than your fear of getting hurt. And there's some days where I feel like I can forgive Bethany. And there's some days where I feel like I can't. But I'm going to try to be brave. I'm going to try to be brave for me and Dad. Thank you.